Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
On today's Your Take, I'm joined by a professional American musician who has worked in the music business for 20 years. A self-taught musician, my guest has released 13 albums, 2 EPs, and has performed around the world on the live music scene for 2 decades. She performs with her band Gypsy Fuzz and as a solo artist, showcasing her songwriting, singing, and guitar skills. The music has been described as a blend of 1970s, 80s, and 90s rock for the modern age and with new twists. My guest has opened for and shared the stage with a list of artists, including Katie Tunstall, Brandi Carlile, the Dixie Chicks, Hart, Christopher Cross, America, Don McLean, and many more. My guest composed and performed the music for the Johnny Cash Franklin Bible Session, a spoken word recording, has supported and raised money for her music to many important causes, such as helping abused women, homeless shelters, animal cruelty, as well as the American Cancer Society, Musicians on Call, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and many other notable causes. My guest today is musician Christine Havrilla. We discuss Christine's early life, her education, and discovery of music, how she became a professional recording and touring musician, some of the projects and musicians she has worked alongside, the rock and roll lifestyle, and the hurdles on her journey in becoming a musician and songwriter. It's 9 o'clock here in the UK, and you, I believe, are based in Delaware in the USA. A very warm welcome. Thank you for being a guest on Your Take.
Hi, James. I am so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No, thank you. Obviously, the kind of purpose of our conversation, I say today, is to kind of speak about your life, your journey in becoming a professional musician, from recording to touring, and musicians you've collaborated with on that journey. But I kind of always start with the obvious. Turn the clock back and go back to the beginning.
Way back.
I wanted to start off with asking when and where you were born, and just finding out some background about your family life and your parents. Who are they? What do they do for a living? And do you have any siblings?
Yes. So I was born just outside of Philadelphia. Most people know Philadelphia. So maybe 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia. I was born in a little town called Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Grew up in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, my whole life until I busted out to college, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So I grew up in a little town called Pottstown, and there was a town area, but we were kind of out in the woods. So it was, I feel like I had the best of both worlds. I had the town life, which was so close, but I also had that vast place to run around and be free. And so I was very distracted by all those sorts of things. My dad worked for Bell Telephone. He first used to climb telephone poles, and he would do the wiring and everything. And my mom was actually a hairdresser. Eventually my mom, started having kids. So myself, and then I have one sibling who's 5 years younger than me. My sister's Angela. And then mom started staying home and maybe cutting hair out of her house. So, it was still a time where not both parents had to work as much. So there was still a bit of a choice. My dad continued working for AT&T in the communications field until he retired. So he was in that, realm. And my mom was a hairdresser when, if and when people needed it, but really was around for us growing up. And that's where I got my start as far as my family.
I wanted to be kind of rude and a bit intrusive, and I wanted to ask kind of what time period was this? What kind of year?
This is the 70s. Yeah, this is the 70s. So growing up in the 70s, we didn't even start talking about music, but there was so much music that excited me at such a young age. You know, the records that my dad played, which I know we'll get to, but you know, it was a great musical era, I think, all across the board. So many things happening in UK and in US here musically. So
a brief portrait of family life and giving us some kind of background and context about your parents. But I kind of wanted to ask, did you come from a musical family at all? And at what age did you first fall in love with music? And what were you listening to?
sure, I am fortunate to have a very musical family. My dad was a guitar player. My aunt Roseanne was a guitar player. My cousin Butchie, my uncle Angelo played drums. I mean, there's a big list. My great uncle played mandolin. My great grandpa Dominic played the accordion. Wherever I visited, wherever family life was for me, there was music. So, I mean, I was picking up a mandolin and a guitar by the age of 3. By the age of 4, they let me play all the instruments. I had access to all the instruments. My uncle was showing me how to play the drums when I was 5. So I was really, really lucky that I had so much music around me. And it really went into my soul. I mean, from a very young age. And I was able to, you know, here's the story how it really started. So my dad used to keep his guitar under the bed when he went to work. And I was about 3 or 4 years old. And I remember sneaking into the bedroom because I knew where he had it. And I remember pulling the guitar out, opening it up, and he had this Mel Bay guitar book, which showed you like how to play a C, how to play a D. And I would practice real quietly and I'd put the guitar away. And one day he noticed, he's like, has somebody touched my guitar? No lie, this is how it started. And I was like, you know, I didn't want to lie. And I was like, yeah, I wanted to see your guitar. And he was like, well, you know, you're supposed to do that when I'm around. But I'm like, let me show you what I've learned. I was like 4 years old and I started playing the song and my mom and dad looked at each other. They're like, okay. And that was literally the start. They bought me my first plastic, and I have it for you. This is my very first guitar. It was from Sears.
Yeah. This is interesting.
It was a plastic. I've seen it in Austin in like an antique shop. So it doesn't have strings, but this is the very first guitar they bought me. It's this plastic guitar. You know, I mean, this is like crazy. I have kept it with me everywhere I've moved.
I love the illustrations on it as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like country-ish.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it says Western folk.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I loved it. And I just played that thing every day. And I taught myself how to play. And then I also, you know, I went to Catholic school. So there was a time where there were still a few nuns left. And that was another place I really got interested in music because my teachers played guitar. And, you know, the whole church thing, they would go, there's usually the organ and the very solemn mass going on. But they also had this guitar mass that was happening. And my dad was in the band and my teachers were in the band. And they let me come and join them. They gave me this fat felt pick so that no one could hear me. But I'd be back there like wailing away on that pick. And but that's how I learned to like watch everybody, follow the leader, look at the, you know, I don't read music, but they had the words in like C, G, D. And honestly, I just ran with it. I was so happy around adults playing music all the time. And that's what really got the bug in me.
There's no question that music's in your genes, in your family blood, you know, from, you know, a family full of musicians playing a range of instruments.
Yeah.
But what kind of music was being played in the household? And were they listening to records? Were they listening to music on commercial radio stations as well? And did you kind of rebel against the music that they were playing and kind of discovered your own kind of love of certain genres, certain artists? How did that kind of develop?
Yes. You know, my parents were very cool. So my dad had a great record collection and he would let me open the turntable and put records on. So some of the records I was gravitating towards was Zeppelin, was Simon and Garfunkel, John Denver even. I'm trying to think of some other ones, but some band called Waves from Europe. My mom had a few records, but the Moody Blues was another band. Like those were the musicians that excited me. When I put the record on and he let me listen to his headphones, the big cans, I was just taken away. There was another it's an odd band that not a lot of people in the US know of, but I know you in the UK know.
Hmm.
Steel Eye Span,
Yeah.
the old folk rock band. So
Yeah.
All
I
Around
know
My
them.
Hat was
Yeah.
one of my top 10 favorite albums because I remember listening to All Around My Hat over and over and over. And that folk rock, the fiddles with the drums, like that was like what I wanted to do. And I was like that. I listened to that album every day, probably. So stuff like that, pretty eclectic mix. I didn't listen to the Beatles. I didn't listen to certain other songs and albums, but Zeppelin, John Denver. I mean, it's kind of like all over the place, and the music was always on. In the car, you turn the radio on, and we listened to. There was like rock stations, so whatever was on the radio, I would just sing at the top of my lungs with my mom. You know, we didn't have seatbelts back then, so you're bouncing around, and the gear shift was the microphone, and I'd be singing into the microphone. So they knew they were in for it. Like they knew that music was definitely going to be a part of my life. Period. The end.
A great eclectic taste in music, but
Mhm.
I kind of wanted to find out what the live music scene was like where you lived. And
Right.
have you any sort of vivid memories from performers you'd seen on stage prior to being a musician?
Yes.
And did any of them inspire you to want to become a professional musician yourself?
Yes. The music scene in the Philadelphia area at that time, it was on the cusp of, the rock bands, the heavier rock bands, because of the radio stations, MMR and YSP. It was just turning into the new wave. I'm a big 80s girl, 80s fan. And when that kind of music started getting played, it was like really exciting. And we had a lot of great venues where, I mean, of course, I was too young because most of the venues you had to be 21 and over, unless they had a special event at a college or somewhere. So the rock bands, I'd hear some of the local bands on the radio. So I don't know where you're from. Did they have like a local radio station too, where they highlighted just local artists, not just the bigger names that were on the labels and
So
international?
before we kind of started recording, I'm based in a city called Bristol, and
Right,
mainly the stations, we got one BBC local station,
right.
which tends to play mainly kind of older music,
Hmm.
classic pop, you could say,
Right,
and
right.
then commercial radio. But my problem always was, Christine, that I was always listening to music
Hmm.
that was around like 10, 15 years before I was even born.
Before, right.
Yeah, I was kind of, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
wasn't kind of listening to new stuff. I didn't
Current.
really, the
Yeah.
new stuff didn't really kind of turn me on. But kind of when I was growing up in the 90s, a big thing was kind of kicking off in the UK with a lot of bands like Oasis, Blur, that kind of
Yes.
whole
Hmm.
scene was going on, which kind of looking back at it was quite a vibrant time. Yeah.
Yes. Garbage, all those bands. I
Yeah,
love
you got
that.
them.
I mean, I love the 90s scene, those bands, as well as over here we had Pearl Jam. Like I just remember being blown away by that stuff. Luckily, we had a local spotlight at some of the radio stations in the Philly area. So I got to hear up and coming local bands. And one of them at the time was the Hooters, who I know are huge now. And remember seeing them and getting inspired that, well, these guys can play, they're local and they're going to get out there and make it. And you know I'd go see a folk singer in a little coffee house, or someone at church was singing. Just, it didn't matter who it was, I was just excited about live music. My dad took me to a few concerts when I was younger. He took me to see Peter, Paul and Mary, which was quite interesting. I was probably one of the youngest ones there, but just to hear them and see them with the upright bass and hear the harmonies, the singing came later for me. I was playing the guitar, but I never wanted to sing. My dad's like, "You got to sing." I'm like, "I don't want to sing, but you got to sing," and he just encouraged me to keep listening to the harmonies and look how they listen to each other and feed off each other. And he also took me to see like Leo Kottke and like amazing guitar players, Phil Kagi. So I was just blown away by anything that my dad could take me to see, to take the time to, if it would inspire me or not. So I was lucky that in that way.
You briefly touched upon your schooling,
Yeah.
but I kind of wanted to go in a little bit more detail and find out where you went to school, and were they kind of happy times in your life? And obviously the music was your passion, that's what you
Right.
wanted to do. It seems to me, during our conversation so far, but I kind of wanted to find out on a kind of academia level,
Mhm.
which subjects you excelled in, and
Mm.
did you go on to further education?
Yeah, school, I liked school because I loved seeing my friends. I was competitive, so I was always towards the top of the class. Me and a few friends I just know through the years through grade school. We went through St. Aloysius grade school, so it was a Catholic grade school. We all wore uniforms, which I was really happy for because I couldn't imagine trying to figure out what clothes to wear every day. I was already kind of a nerd and kind of like shy, and I wanted to fit in, but I liked the athletes because I played basketball and soccer, but I liked the smarter kids and I liked the creative kids. So, I had the blend of all those worlds I was tied into. But I didn't really get real close to one section, or like I didn't have like a best friend all the time. I really had older adults in my life I was playing music with. So it was really kind of strange. I was always around adults and playing music or listening to music or watching my dad play. So it was just a very strange time. I didn't really play music with friends until like way in high school. But my school years were great. I was a happy kid. I again, shy, really shy, but you give me a guitar and I'm fine. But otherwise, really shy. But I studied hard, and I did well in school. Getting to high school, I went to St. Pius X High School, which was a Catholic high school.
Mm.
And that's when, you met more kids. I mean, there were maybe 500 kids in our whole school, so it was still a pretty small school. I, in the Catholic education field, when they have to cut funding, they usually cut music and art class. And that's what kept happening. I noticed, every time I got to do a class like that I loved, it was cut. They had the football team and they had sports, but they kept all the classes that you really needed to have. But I begged my parents at one point to please let me go to public school. So I would have gone to Upper Pottsgrove, because my friends on the bus would be like, "Oh, look what I made in pottery class," and like, "Look, I have drumsticks. I'm taking like guitar and drum in school." And like my eyes were like, "What?" I couldn't believe that they were all doing that in school and having that like all this fun. Like I went to metalsmith class and like all this creative stuff. But I stayed in Catholic school. I stayed my course. Had good friends. I kind of started a band in high school. It was kind of, we weren't that great, but we had a lot of fun just experimenting and writing stuff. It's funny. I just had coffee with one of my friends from high school about 2 weeks ago, and she and I had written 2 songs together, and we were howling because we're like, "God, you remember that song?" I'm like, "I remember almost all the lyrics." It was crazy. Um, I just hadn't thought about that for like 30 years. It's crazy how stuff like that, sticks with you. But, did the music thing. I'd play it at school when they had like masses because I went to Catholic school.
Mm.
And then I met some friends who were a little bit older and outside of school. And that's where it really blew up, because I had this friend, we played guitars together. We were kind of a duo. And we started playing coffee shops, or like, church hall would sponsor a coffee shop or whatever. And I started having older, cooler friends that could take me to concerts too. One of my big influences around that time, I was really into U2 and
Yeah.
Simple Minds, 10,000 Maniacs, all that 80s music, Depeche Mode, REM, just I was just turned on to this whole other world that was kind of like the indie, I guess you would compare it to the indie rock scene now, like alternative scene. And I just, I love that. I love my school friends, but then I also loved the people outside of school that just fed me all this music. I was like a sponge for most of those, school years. And then you did ask about college. I tried to go to college. I didn't want to go. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was like, I want to play music. Can I play music? So what I decided to do was put my guitar away for about a year. And I went to college. I went to a small university outside of Philadelphia. And I hated it. I hated it. I mean, it was like, I don't know. I couldn't get into a groove there. And I met some really amazing people that I'm still friendly with now. And I think those friends got me through, the initial shock of, okay, you're away from home and you can make bigger decisions for your life now. Did the typical stupid stuff. I started drinking, partying in college and all that stuff, which was really distracting. And I still did well. I don't know how I pulled it off. I played basketball, had a scholarship. I still managed to do well in school, but I was so unhappy. And
Mm,
so after 2 years of it, I spoke to the dean. She's like, take some time off. She says, go figure out. It was the best advice someone had given to me. And the other thing that had kept me alive then was that I was in this band. So it was a band called the Twitch and Vibes. Charlie, Bill, Scott, and Trish. It was a 5-piece band. We practiced once a week. And those guys really opened my eyes to like one was Deadhead. So I'm like, oh, the Grateful Dead. I never listened to them. And the other guy was a big Who fan. I'm like, oh, I never listened to the Who. So everybody else brought another like piece of music to me that I like had my eyes open to. And I learned to collaborate more and songwrite together, and it just kept building. And that's when I was like, I'm gonna pop. I need to quit college. I need to figure out what I'm gonna do to try to keep making music. And then that was like the closing of that chapter in my life.
probably a good point now to ask you how you make the transition from having a love of music, learning and playing an instrument, to, you know, becoming a professional musician and performing on the live music scene.
Mhm.
Did you join or form any bands, or which you kind of answered already, or
Mhm.
perform as a solo musician? And what was kind of that music scene like at the time, and what kind of material were you performing sort of
Right.
during those early years?
Right. So when the 90s hit, the singer songwriter really became highlighted, I think, at least in the States, of the music scene. You know, the singer songwriters like Sean Colvin, Jonathan Brooke, Sheryl Crow, you know, there's whole Indigo Girls, Tracy Chapman. When I heard those singers, I was like, okay, this is cool. I can do this. I started playing out on my own because I didn't have, you know, to have a band and put the time into it and pay people, whatever. Because now you're thinking about, how can I make a living? I would just start playing once a week at the coffee house, and more people came. And then I'd play another time and more people came. I had a band called Barnwood Rose, and then that fell apart after a year. Then I had like the Christine Havrilla band, and people kept showing up. And hitting the year about 1996, I decided, all right, I'm going to record an album, because everyone was starting to kind of DIY it. You didn't have to be on a label.
Mm,
You could spend the money in a studio. We had quite a few great studios in the Philadelphia area. So I just kept playing out, getting people to hear me. You know, used to get the mailing list, used to actually send paper mail postcards to people like, come check out the show. Like, this is again before the whole online digital age. So I'm still like coming up to that right now. But in order to stay in touch with people, we would mail stuff out. People kept showing up, and you started getting some momentum. Made my first recording, and I was still kind of working part time. And then I finally took some time off, and I quit my job because MP3 came out, and then the shows kept piling up, and I was just getting these opportunities. It was like I was blessed that things were landing in my lap. People were asking me to open for them, local bands, you know, let's do some shows together. And people really kind of helped guide me, and they looked out for me to help me get my start. And, you know, fast forward now, I hope to do that to young artists too, because you need help. I mean, yes, you can follow the YouTube video on how to make it as a music, you know, professional, but there's something to be said about having that humanness, that interaction and that connection that helps you along. So yeah, and it was up and down. I struggled, you know, and stumbled, and have great shows, and have shows where there's 4 people there. But my whole thing was, you know, you play for the people that come and show up, whether it's 1,000 people or 14 or 4.
mm.
And I just kept that positive attitude, and then just kept going. And I just, you know, I'm stubborn. So I'm like, even when you have a bad time, I'm like, no, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep playing. I'm going to keep writing. Um, and really it's like a blur, because it's been a long time. It's been like 25 years, and I'm still here doing it, which is like, I have to pinch myself sometimes, but I'm really grateful to still be doing this. So
I wanted to kind of jump very much forward in time, and we turn the clock back to around about 10, 11 years ago, when you
okay.
formed the Christine Havrilla and the Gypsy Fuzz. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, how did you meet the other band members?
Hmm.
Where did the band's name come from?
Right.
And always an awkward question to ask a musician this, but how would you describe the music, the sound?
Right. Right. So that was an interesting time. I had just moved all the way across the country to Portland, Oregon. So I was out in the Northwest, and after a few relationships that didn't work out, I was dating someone, and I decided to make this big change in my life. So it was a lot of change for me, and that gypsy and the fuzz. So those two elements, my mom always used to joke, "Oh, you're such a gypsy," because I'd always be on the road. I would drive 10 hours to play one gig and drink a cup of coffee and turn around because that's just how I am. But I'm always like moving. I'm always getting around
Was
and playing music. So the gypsy, yeah.
was that aspect of the kind of the work, was that appealing to you, like almost living out of a suitcase, touring from
Yeah.
place to place, new
I loved it.
locations?
Yeah. I mean, I always just had an apartment. I never owned a house. So I kept the apartment as a home base. But I love being on the road because I met so many amazing people at new venues and in these new markets. So in the States, you can go from one state to the other, within 2 hours sometimes. So you could drive all the way down up and down the East Coast. I could start in Boston and go to Atlanta, and every 2 hours have a new market that wasn't going to take away from each other. So it was so congested. It was good for us independent musicians. So, meeting people, meeting other musicians along the way, I absolutely loved it. It was always an adventure. I had my responsibilities at home, like I kept up with those, but it just kind of fed my soul. So moving all the way across the country to Oregon that was my biggest gypsy move, I guess you could say. And as I was traveling out there, because I spent a month and just took off from life, and I booked this tour on my own and just went up and down the West Coast, just to kind of refine myself. I just found myself like, I need to change the scenery. I'm not sure what's happening next in my life, but I have the music, and I booked this tour, and I went off for a month by myself, all the way down to like, Southern California, all the way up to Vancouver, and just hung out on the West Coast doing shows, meeting people. I ended up with some friends in Oregon, and then that's where this whole let's move to Portland thing came up. I feel like that's where the fuzz and the gypsy kind of connected, because I was leaving my music and my musician friends behind on the East Coast, and I was starting over in the West Coast, and it was very hazy. So the whole fuzz part, literally, like, it's fuzzy. I couldn't tell you what was going to happen next, but that was the exciting part of it. And so the gypsy and the fuzz kind of like came to my head one day. I was driving out that way. I think I was in Idaho or somewhere, and I'm like, Gypsy Fuzz, Gypsy Fuzz. I'm like, that's gonna be the name of the band. And then that album also has a little bit more of a fuzz sound, because I did more electric guitar on that.
Mm.
I had done a bunch of acoustic guitar, singer-songwriter driven albums, and I wanted to do something different. The other albums, they were fine, got turned down by labels. Like, nothing was like getting me to the next level. And I was like, I'm going to do something a little different. And I just kind of turned it up a little and had some new musicians that I worked with. Some of the guys, though, my drummer and bass player, I had brought from the Philadelphia area out, and then they met a bunch of musicians from the Portland area. And then I sent files. I mean, this was the time too, where like, I remember talking to a friend of mine in Toronto. I'm like, can you play electric guitar on 3 tracks? We'll send you the files. He didn't have to be there. A friend of mine, Mel, she was from Australia. She just moved to Seattle. She's like a great horn player. I'm like, Mel, can you play some horns? We'll send you the tracks. Great. Here's the file. Which was weird because I like to connect with people, but they did such an amazing job in feeling the music, So again, this Gypsy Fuzz album was new on so many different levels for me. New musicians, new way of recording, new place I'm recording, new place in my life, new songs, a louder sound. I also got to work with an amazing guy. Larry Crane was the engineer and producer. He has Tape Op magazine, which is a big, anybody in the recording industry knows that magazine. He is like a brilliant genius, and I learned so much from him. Just, I don't want to stop recording. Like, we were a month into it, and I'm like, I don't want to start mixing. Like, I had so much fun. I didn't want to stop, but I know I had to. So that Gypsy Fuzz, the unknowing, the new sound, that's kind of where that whole concept came from. And I didn't know how it was going to go over with people. I didn't really care. It was like, it was true to me at the time. So
I want to talk about the recording process now, because you've been very prolific. You've released 13 albums
Yeah.
and 2 EPs.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, do you enjoy the recording process? And of the projects you've produced so far, are there any personal favorites? And if so, why?
I do love recording. When I first started recording, I had a lot of anxiety. You know, your first time doing something that means so much to you. I didn't know how it was going to go, but I've been blessed with great engineers, great people around me, great studios where you just feel at ease. I mean, you still have moments like in the beginning, I just wanted everything to be perfect, and I'd retake, redo. And, you know, was a little, my first two albums were before the digital age where you could just go in and get the
So
WAV file. So I did
they
tape.
were they on reel to reel then?
Yeah,
Were they
reel to
at
reel
the old analog
and ADAT.
process?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I still did that moving forward. But, you know, editing and mixing wasn't as easy to do because you're standing there, you're holding all the knobs and you're mixing 20 some tracks, you know, and you do a take and you're like, that was pretty good, but we need a little more snare. So you roll the tape back and you start over. So it was definitely a more involved process, but I absolutely loved it. And, you know, the one thing that was hard for me was when to let go, because I was such a perfectionist. And I had to be reminded by a good friend, this recording is of this moment. You can play the song in a year live, it's going to be different. You can play it 10 years from now. And I was like, that like made sense to me. So I was like, okay, let's do the best version of the song here and now. And so be it. So, you know, I love the recording process. Move forward a few years where now you're into this whole digital age, you know, you're in the box. I still would do reel to reel, and I would drop everything into Pro Tools or whatever. And you can edit a little easier but then I noticed you're looking at the WAV files instead of listening. So there's that challenge of, let's not look at what we're mixing. Let's get back to hearing what we're mixing. So I love the recording process. I've worked in small studios, large studios. You know, I've been so lucky and blessed to have amazing people to work with. And, you know, do I like it more than playing live? No, but it's something that's really good that I think musicians need to do because it makes you stop and prepare. You know, like I'd have songs that weren't finished. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have to record vocals tomorrow. I don't have this verse done. You know, I think giving yourself deadlines, you know, this is for any musician, giving yourself deadlines really helps, because you can be working on a song for 5 years and never finish it. So, you know, recording is different from the live process, but I love it. It definitely makes me think differently and be more organized, and also arrange parts. It forces you to like, okay, let's talk about the solo. What's it going to be? How long is it going to be? And then sometimes you're just jamming, and sometimes things happen organically in the studio, which is magical. For instance, I have an album called Ruby Red. I recorded it up in Woodstock, New York at Bearsville Studio. And I had this whole song called Sing, which was kind of an indie rocker, a little faster. And we were just kind of warming up, and the drummer just started like, do, do, stop, do. And we all just kind of started jamming. And all of a sudden we're doing that song, which is supposed to be fast forward indie rock. And we ended up pulling the whole song back and changing it right there in the studio because it felt of that moment. So, you know, magic can happen, and then stuff can just go horribly wrong in the studio. So, you know, it's definitely a great experience. But I do like live better.
From one side of the musical creative process, we look at the flip side of the coin, and that's composition of your own songs and material.
Right.
And I kind of wanted to ask, do you enjoy composing your own songs and lyrics? And I'm always interested to ask musicians about kind of the songwriting process.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about writing your own songs, and do you try to write from personal experience,
Mm-hmm.
or do you try to tell a story? Would you say you're kind of a narrative storyteller
Mm-hmm.
in song form?
Yeah, I am the type of songwriter where I'd say 95% of the time, because I'm more guitar driven and stronger there, I'll come up with a melody on the guitar. I'll be noodling, and that usually starts a song for me 95% of the time, where the music creates a vibe. And then I start humming to it. Sometimes I don't know what I'm going to write about. Other times I might hear something a friend told me, or I get inspired by a film or a book or something I saw in person out at the grocery store or something. As long as I have something that triggers this idea, then I can write a song. Very rarely have I written words. I don't just write poetry. I don't just write words a lot, but I'll get a lot of one-liners or two-liners. I have, believe me, you don't want to see my voice memos and my notebooks because it's all like 2 lines of something that could be someday. But but every once in a while, for instance, a song of mine called Hole in the Ground, a song called Blinders, a song called Ride. Those are 3 songs off the top of my head I wrote in 5 minutes where I had this idea, I'll take you for a ride, and boom, it was done. It was word driven. But I said that's like 5% of the time. Usually I'm noodling and I let the music create the vibe. As far as from personal experience, I do write, I feel like a lot of the songs have a section that might reflect something personally from me, but the song might not be the entire story of
Yeah.
what happened to me. Although every once in a while, I do know that there's that extra connection that if it's this is truly about me, and you kind of sing with more emotion, whatever, people can relate to it. But so I do put pieces of myself in a lot of songs, or pieces of something that somebody told me, or I get a character in my head, like I think about someone who's struggling with something, and I try to be general enough that you always hope someone can grab onto a song or grab onto what you've written, that, hey man, I've been through this and I felt like that, thank you. So, because we are human, yes, a lot of the songs are about me or something I felt at one point or another. They're not all entirely about me. Some are about friends, some are about just a character I kind of think about. That's pretty general because we're all human, and I think we all have our ups and downs, and luckily we all experience all sorts of emotions. So I think writing a song about a certain emotion, you're going to find that audience, and someone's going to grab onto it somewhere at some point.
20 years of working in the music business as a professional musician. We've spoken about recording, we've spoken about performing on the live scene at bigger venues and smaller venues as well. But how difficult is it to make a living from being a professional recording and touring musician?
Mm.
And I also wanted to ask you, do you have an agent, and are you currently signed to a label?
Right. Now, moments in my life, I have had management and booking, and I've never been signed to a label. I've been turned down by many. Again, once you hit a certain, year, everyone was doing more of the DIY, the home recordings, or you could go into a studio. So I just knew that I had to keep putting music out. So I've pretty much been independent my whole time recording. Um, the last 12 years, I've been doing it all on my own. I have no agent, no booking agent. I've been doing everything myself. Um, Luckily, I've had great people that I've worked with in the past that have taught me along the way to stay organized. And now with, once you got email, you used to have to phone call people on a Tuesday between 2 and 4 to possibly get a gig. Now I feel like I can reach out much easier via the internet to connect to venues and booking agents. So you can do it on your own. And I have no fear of reaching out to someone being like, hey, I'm gonna be passing through Asheville. I'd love to share some music. Here's the link. Like, as long as you have everything set up online, you can do it yourself now, as long as you get people to the right spots. Do I like doing it? Sometimes I feel like I spend more time in the office in the week because I have to work about PR and do the press releases, and I got to get the stage plot to the I have to do everything. But it's part of me. It's my life. It's not like, it's not a job. I mean, I much rather be playing my guitar more and maybe writing a few more songs here and there. But
It's almost being like a one a one person band.
yeah,
Business person. You're a
yeah,
business person, aren't you? Because
yeah,
you're responsible for your
yeah, everything.
marketing, yeah, making
and
sure
and
you
a lot
get
of people,
paid, and
yeah, and
yeah,
there's a
it's
lot of
business.
a lot of us out there, which is great when you're on the road and you meet people who are right there in it with you doing the same thing, and I respect that because you're here, you're from 10 states away, and look at, you did it, you're here. Granted, you have to make a living, and that's the other thing. I've been fortunate enough, I was in Oregon for like 5 years. When I moved back to the Philadelphia area, it is much easier to, with the market and the how close everything is. It's much easier to play music in more venues to more people because it's more congested. And I feel like I needed to come home in order to kind of get that going again. But yeah, I still am doing it by myself. Would I love to have help? Yeah, I definitely wouldn't mind having some booking help, especially because one of my goals has been to come to Europe to play. And it's I wouldn't want to do it by myself. I'd love to do it with someone, another artist, and through an agency that knows what, where to send me and what to do with my music. But yeah, I mean, you can do it by yourself now. So I wear all those hats, fortunately and unfortunately, because I hate when there's an issue, then you have to deal with the issue, but they look at you as, well, you're the musician. So, there's a fine line with that. I'd much rather have a manager have to call somebody about something that has come up rather than me have to do it. But then I think more venues are used to independent artists doing more of the stuff as well. So
from talking about all the different hats you have to put on and the skills you need and that kind of business element as well, it kind of moves nicely onto my next question, in which what platforms or media do you use to publicize and make money from your music?
Right.
From your point of view, which is the most lucrative and why?
It's interesting because, selling music online, especially for an independent artist, I haven't traveled to the UK yet. I haven't been to Australia, but people can buy my music from anywhere in the world. So when MP3 came out, that was the first jump into like downloading music. And I was making all the artists were making quite a bit of money. That all stopped after a few years. And, as most things do, everybody gets a piece of it. Apple Music, I go through CD Baby, which does the digital distribution to Apple and to different places that you can choose, because I want my music to be heard and I want people to find me. And thankfully, because of that platform, anybody in the whole world could find me, as opposed to you have to live near me to actually hear me live or hear me on a local radio station. I use Facebook a lot because you can create events. Instagram, it's the connecting with people, especially that are from farther away or I don't get to see and sing to as much. So Facebook and Instagram are big. Reverb Nation is a big thing that a lot of independent artists use, where you can get your electronic press kit up and you can have video and my website. My website's the main thing. I mean, I want people to go onto my website and click everywhere, because that's where you'll find bios, you'll find what gear I use, you'll find videos, you can listen to music, you can buy t-shirts, you can check out the tour. So getting people to the website is my first and foremost goal. But then, having them pop on YouTube, it's like, you need to get people to like you. And it's so weird because, this day and age, it's like everybody can put stuff out there. There's everyone can get on the soapbox of YouTube, of Facebook, and perform something, and people can get millions of likes. Is it good? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I feel like there's a lot of clutter. Not that I'm saying I don't want people to be creative, but I'm glad that there's a place for people to be creative and put things out there. But I feel like there's a lot of clutter sometimes too. So even with the whole online thing, I still don't know. I'm still trying to maneuver through it and find the best way to reach fans and reach new fans and a new audience. I'm still always maneuvering through it, but I still use YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. People like to see pictures and video and connect and actually make a comment, which is great, because they feel like we're connecting. And as we spoke about the past 2 years, when everything was shut down, doing the live streams on Facebook or YouTube really just saved our souls, because we got to connect with people via online. It's like, thank goodness for that. So I'm still maneuvering. I still don't know the best outlets. It's people love Spotify, but then people, Spotify's evil. Like there's good and bad to everything. It's just finding what works for you, what works for me. So
I wanted to move on now and talk about collaboration and some of the musicians you work with and alongside, and some of the musicians you've opened shows for. And I was going to ask you, firstly, of all the musicians you've collaborated with, supported on tour, performed alongside, which have you found the most fulfilling and you've kind of learned musically the most from?
Interesting, because I'm thinking of two shows right off the top of my head. One was way back when I was first starting out. I opened for James Ewen, who was a very prolific songwriter from the 70s. I did a show with her, and she was just the coolest person. And we're back in the green room, and she's eating her way through the food and drinking beer and talking, and this little energetic person. And then, man, she did not miss a note. She's so prolific, and she was so kind and generous to me, and just like, like, do what you got to do and play your music. And that left an impression on me. She took the time to talk to me and like, good luck, kid, that kind of stuff. And then I fast forward to some more recent two artists, actually. Well, KT Tunstall, you mentioned.
I was going to come on to talking
Yeah,
about her. Yeah.
she was, that was one of my favorites, probably one of my favorite times. We had the show booked 2 years ago. It had been rescheduled, I'd say 5 times, and we finally made it work just this past December. And she was huge and influential to me. I mean, I love her music. So I must say, it was the first time in a while I'd been a little nervous to do a gig. It's a venue I love. It was outside of Philadelphia. It held 500 people. She was the most awesome, sincere, kindest person. As soon as I walked in, I felt like at home. I was a part of this night. She was just super witty and funny and charming. And we ended up doing a song together. It was right around the holidays. So we did Run, Run, Rudolph together. And she trusted me to show up and, all right, let's run it through sound check. And she trusted me enough to let me play with her on her stage. So it was such a cool experience. The kindness, even her tour manager, everybody, that stuff stands out to me and goes a long, long way, because they take the time to like talk to you, and they're not just hiding behind the door and, yeah, go ahead, opener. Okay, it's our turn. So that was a really big deal. She was just such a super kind person. Just really funny too. So really left a big positive impact on me for sure. Yeah.
Interestingly, I kind of wanted to ask you on the flip side of that. You've mentioned about musicians acting as almost mentors and willing to share tricks of the trade or be hospitable. And you mentioned about KT Tunstall having that kind of warm northern Scottish charm and just real and genuine musician. But I'd also imagine that music can be competitive. There are a lot of egos involved in music. Have you had any experiences that have been disappointing with people that you'd listen to or kind of worship from a fan point of view that ended up being a little bit of a disappointing experience?
Yeah, no one I like worship, but I do remember early on, I remember two shows in particular, hot singer-songwriters on the independent AAA radio scene. I got a chance to open for this one guy, this really amazing venue. I was on tour. I was excited to be in this new venue and to be playing with him. He's a monster guitar player. He just wasn't nice. Like, I had my guitar tech with me too, and we both were like, I'm like, am I misreading? But, and sometimes people are having a bad day. I don't like to judge if someone's cranky or they're not nice. Maybe they're just having an off moment. And I kind of just put it up to that. No one's ever been like mean to me. If people don't feel like talking to you, they just stay in their green room and they don't come out and connect with you, which is fine, because I'm sure they've been touring. Sometimes they need a little quiet time. So I give people the benefit of the doubt. And I don't think anyone's ever out to be mean. No one has ever really been mean to me. I think sometimes I've had a little bit of an eyebrow raised, because I'm a decent guitar player, and I've had a few people that I've opened for be like, wow, your guitar playing is better than what we're doing. And, again, competition, comparing, I'm not competitive in that regard. I want everyone to be successful. I want to be successful and focus on what I'm doing for that show. But I've never had anybody be mean to me. It's great how kind so many people are. And again, if they don't come out, I just opened for Howard Jones recently, and he was a big
Oh yeah, but going
he
back to
was a
the
oh
80s.
man, I had
Was it
this cassettes.
what is love? That was him, wasn't it?
Yeah, What is
Yeah.
Love and Things Can Only Get Better. I mean, I he was a big influence on me. I think I even had my hair like his at one point with the shaved and like the big, the 80s hair. And he was a big influence. I got to open for him. I talked to the guys he was playing with. The one guy from Concha Gugu was playing the stick and the bass. And then
Mm.
shoot, the guitar player, I can't remember who he was. Howard just kind of hung back to himself, which I get. He's been on tour. Like, I would have loved to have just talked to him and say how much I appreciated his music. But I got to listen to him, and that was so awesome because it had been years since I'd listened to any of that music. That was like such a part of my life growing up. So, a cool experience. Like, I always find the positive in all
It's
these
interesting
things.
that you mentioned Howard Jones
Mm,
because he was someone we actually approached for interview when
okay.
we first started the channel, but maybe one day in the future, who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe we
Yeah. He's
can,
busy.
yeah.
He's going to be touring with Ultravox, coming back to the States. I mean, he was so good. It was stripped down. Like, all this music was electronic, and it was so nice to have it all stripped down and the musicianship that he has. And I would think it was his 60th birthday that night. I'm like, that was so awesome. Like, he's still doing what he loves. I hope when I'm that age to still be doing what I love, making a living and sharing music. I mean, why not?
I want to discuss a musical project you worked on, which is a spoken word recording, but
Mm,
it's kind of one of my great heroes that resonates a lot from childhood and being exposed to his music, his early Sun recordings to
hmm
the stuff he did with Rick Rubin, and that's Johnny Cash. And you
yeah.
composed and performed the music for the Johnny Cash Franklin Bible.
Yep.
How did you get involved in that project? And are you a particular fan of Cash's music and his legacy, so to speak?
Right. That was such an odd, random thing. Up until that point, I hadn't really listened to Johnny Cash. I knew a few of the songs, but I didn't seek out his music. At the time, my lawyer, I had a management company at the time, and my lawyer at the time was working with Franklin Publishing,
Hmm.
and it was her idea to help get me involved with, obviously Johnny Cash, Bible Belt, the South, always loved gospel music and spoken word. He was getting older in his years, and they were asking him to read his favorite Bible verses, and which was a part of his upbringing. And they asked me to somehow put the guitar underneath the verses he was reading. And I was like, wow, okay, no pressure, right? So I had to send music to his management company to get approved. And I think I was probably about 28 at the time. So
He was still alive
he
at the
was
time then.
he was
Yeah.
very far on, and I think he passed pretty soon after, because even his voice sounds so tired and so, I think it was before he even did like his album, like the Nine Inch Nails songs, all those old songs. Like, it was before that, but I know his health was starting to kind of decline. But they approved me to do the music, and they gave me the Bible verses that he was reading. So growing up in Catholic school and growing up around church, like, I had familiarity, and I knew some of what he was reading was darker, some of it was lighter. So that kind of just guided me to figure out what I wanted to play underneath. The tricky part when I went into that session is they're like, okay, we're not doing any editing. We're on a time crunch. So you just have to play it like first take. And I was like, what? Okay. I was stressed out, but I was like, okay, we can do this. I mean, I love a challenge. I was a little stressed out, but I really had one pass to, like, okay, go. And, I was thinking I'd be able to stop and start and we can edit things, but we did not. So that was just a very unique, crazy experience that I had. I actually have a copy of that he signed for me. I still
Oh
have it,
wow.
which was really nice that he took a moment to send that to me, his company. But I still have that signed by him, which was like a nice thing that just says, you know what, you can do things, you can get places if you just stick it out, put your mind to it. And it's nice to have help along the way too, because if I didn't have my lawyer at the time, she's passed on now, but if I didn't have my lawyer at the time working at that moment, again, how things line up timing wise, I might not have had that opportunity. Somebody else might have played the guitar, or no one played the guitar. So, I really do look at, if you're in the right place at the right time, it definitely helps in this business, to kind of get a foot in the door, a toe in the door, finger in the door sometimes. So that's how that whole project came about. It was for the electronic publishing company, but it was a random and cool thing for me that not too many people can say they did. So I got to play guitar for Johnny Cash, in his Bible reading. So it's a very cool thing.
We
Yeah.
digress away from music, and one of the kind of most important things in your life, something you're very passionate about, is topical issues and concerns. And you've dedicated a lot of your time in donating money to many valuable causes. Can you discuss your active involvement in these areas and what charities and concerns are important to you and why?
Right. I'm the type of person that I feel like I might not have a lot of money, but I know I can share music with people. And that usually brings people together, and it gets people aware of causes. So I have done many over the years. Musicians on Call was something that was here in the States, where someone would go once a week and walk around the hospital just to play music for people. And then they'd have bigger events. American Cancer Society, cancer's everywhere. I think everyone's been affected by cancer. Locally, there'd be big walkathons and whatnot. So to donate your time and your music to those types of things, or I would just put on my own shows and fundraisers for that. Very important to me. Again, I really feel like even currently, it's funny because I just wrapped up 3 kind of fundraiser events. Taking care of our own communities is important to me. Everything going on with the Ukraine, I got a bunch of local artists down here, the Delmarva area, which is Delaware, state of Delaware, kind of the Delmarva area. I got a bunch of musicians together with the help of friends, Al and Mary at Frantic Frets. And for about 2 weeks, we got all these artists to agree to raise money from their shows and give to this. My sister used to do missionary work in the Ukraine and elsewhere, and she had a friend that still was over there. He went back over and he was in Poland helping refugees, and he had a GoFundMe, and he had specific things he needed. And I'm like, what better way than to go through somebody that we know to help? I'm over here and I don't know what I can do. What's little Christina Havrilla going to do? So we got a bunch of musicians together. We raised $13,000, and we have people buying the medical packages and shipping things to him that he needs in Poland to help people when they're coming across the border and helping their lives get organized. So you just never know what you can do. I did another thing. There's a local food bank. It's called the Delco Food Project. I did a live stream for them last year, but this year I'm getting ready to go on tour in 2 days. So I did a video and edited it together for them. They're one of the biggest food banks in the Northeast region. They're feeding like 30,000 families. It's insane. It's insane that people are still going hungry. So, for me, I can't go out there and help feed these people. I can't help put the meals together. But for me, what I can do is somehow use the music to help get people aware of it, to donate towards these causes. I wish I could do more, but there's only so much time in a day, and I try to use the music because it gets people's attention. And if it's an event, especially, I can entertain you. I'll entertain you, but you have to agree to be aware of this cause, and you agree to help because they need it so badly. So those are just some I've been involved with.
Again, outside of music, do you have other interests, hobbies, and commitments that kind of take up, a lot of your time and your kind of general day-to-day life? And what would those be?
I think it's good to have distractions. I used to be so music driven. I wasn't balancing other things in my life, where it was starting to be too stressful. And if playing music was becoming stressful, you're not going to have fun while you're doing it. So I have found the balance I have 2 dogs that keep me busy. So first thing in the morning, it's about them. I'm married. I like to kayak, I like to hike. My parents live 20 minutes away. They're in their 70s. So I try to stay involved with them and like, hey, let's go to the beach or like let's get coffee. I'm very family oriented. And I live in a little great community where I can hit the beach. We still have 2 bookstores that are still open. I can hit the bookshop. There's a few record stores that are down here. Like, there's still that old school life that's down here mixed in with all the new stuff that's going on. So I love to get out of the house and enjoy the sunshine and do something active or do something like go to the bookstore, go to the beach, go to see the ocean. I am about 10 minutes from the beach now, and I don't get there enough. It's so close. It's right there. And I have to remind myself to get out to the ocean because it really makes me feel better when I do go see it. I
And
love film, and I love reading. I love films. Like you mentioned, you're from the film back. Oh my gosh.
I love cinema.
Oh my gosh.
Big
It's
part
like
of my life.
I've been to Sundance, and it's like I've been to other film festivals. I love independent, quirky films, but I love some very mainstream ones too. It's just certain films hit me at different times. So I love it. I love to be swept away so I can forget about all my music business stress. Like take me away. And that's why I love watching movies. Yeah.
Christine, shortly we come to the final set of quickfire questions that we ask all Your Take guests
Okay.
to kind of wrap up the interview and find out things we maybe didn't know about them, things they like, maybe things they're not so keen on. But before we do those quickfire questions, the final question is, what are your musical plans for the long-term future? Are you working on any current projects or collaborating with any artists in the studio or on the live music scene?
Yes, I can never stop. So I do have a few things up my sleeve. I'm not planning on doing a full recording of an album yet. However, I'm working on some singles, and one single is called Mother It's Me. A woman I met is working on an independent short film. It's a 30-minute film called Yaches. It's on the homepage of my website. She's getting ready to film, and I read the script and it moved me so much. It's about a woman putting her mother into a home because she's getting dementia. And I feel like so many people can relate to that. And I wrote that song in a few minutes because the character and the storyline just spoke to me. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be scoring guitar, quieter music underneath it on different scenes. So that's up and coming. I've also started this side project called Allir Music. So Rilla is a nickname, Havrilla. So backwards is Allir, Allir. And I looked up some definitions of it. And Icelandic term, it means everyone. And I love that. Allir music, everyone music. And it's more of an electronic acoustic project with my current guitar player, Colleen Clark. She's a brilliant mind. She teaches at a university like engineering and sound, and she's doing a lot of drum programming for me. So it's more like, stuff and 90s club meets a little darkness, but real acoustic guitars. And we're working on a few songs right now. The first one that's coming out soon is called Lying to Your Therapist. And we have a couple that we have up our sleeves. And then I'm finally writing again. So I want to record. I have a great band. I have to give a shout out to my current band. Keith Josa is my bass and keyboard player and singer. He's a brilliant person and musician. And Rich Belando's on drums. Colleen Clark's playing bass and electric guitar, and Gretchen Schultz sings backup. And I'm really lucky to have these people around because I know when the time is ready, I start sending them songs, and we start working on arrangements, and they'll be right there ready to record with me. So not a full album yet, but I hope a few singles once this film gets underway and I get some of these songs for the electronic project. And I also play bass in another band called Mama's Black Sheep out of Baltimore, out of Maryland, which is nice because it's a change of pace for me musically, makes me think differently, and I don't have to be the front person. I can just stay way back and just play the bass and hide a little, So I am so grateful for all these musical projects that are in my lap right now. I'm happy to keep working. I have a full year ahead of me, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep plugging away. I will get to the UK. One of my goals is to play and sing over there at some point, and I know it's going to happen, or even just to visit. So
busy person with lots of creative musical stuff, and the film sounds really interesting, and I've kind of got that.
It's going to be beautiful, I think. Yeah.
and that connection with dementia. I can kind of relate to that myself.
Right.
With my
Right.
dad having dementia.
Right. It's hard. It's so hard.
And I think the people that experience it, the family or the loved ones, it's hard for them as well, to
Oh,
kind of
they don't know what to do
see that
sometimes.
change and
And
that
you want them to be
decline.
safe. You want them to be safe. That's the whole gist of the song, it's me and I want you to be safe. I'm helping you with these things. You don't know this, but yeah, what an intense thing to go through.
Mm.
Yeah.
We move on to that moment. We ask every single Your Take guest
All right.
these quick fire questions. You don't have to think about them at any length or
Okay.
answer them in any detail, but we always ask these to kind of wrap up the interview. Christine Havrilla, here we go. Number one, what would you say is your favorite pastime?
Oh, playing basketball.
Okay.
There's always a part of my life. I'm not thinking, I'm just going with it. Playing basketball has been a great, and soccer and basketball, watching it too anymore.
From soccer to the NBA, we talk about another of your loves that you briefly spoke about, your love of cinema, but what would you say is your favorite film and why?
Top of my head, I love the film Dan in Real Life. Came out, maybe 15 years ago. Steve Carell. It captures humanness. There's loss, there's love, there's family, there's dynamics, there's fighting, there's jealousy, there's everything wrapped up in this film, in this little quirky, wonderful, and ends up being a romantic comedy. Juliette Binoche is in it too, and it's just like, I used to watch that movie at least once a month, and it's been a while. I need to get back to it, but I love that film because it's just like, at the end it says, almost like jump off the cliff and wait and see what happens. Like, don't be afraid to take risks. I think some people are so worried about living, they're not living. So that film to me is just like, you have no idea, just go for it.
And on the topic of film, and I think you mentioned Cannes Film Festival, your love of independent film. Can you cite any other films that have kind of you love and you go back to that are timeless for you?
Yeah, well, a more current one that has been in all the theaters, Nomadland, that had oh my gosh, Frances McDormand in it.
Yeah,
that movie just struck me like, wow, so simple, but just a different way of life, as simplicity, but heartfelt. That just, I don't know, it just struck a nerve with me. I really enjoy that film. It's a good one to make people stop. Yeah.
From cinema now to novels, who is your favorite novelist?
It's crazy. Right now, I don't have a favorite novelist. Like, I like Agatha Christie. I like, some old stuff. But I've been reading some, well, because I'm going on tour and I'm in the car a lot, I've been doing a lot of the audiobooks. So I'm listening to a bunch of books right now. They're mostly like witchy or about like, British spy type of thing, police type of things. It's like, and I'm reading two and listening to two, so I couldn't even remember the authors of either of them right now, and I actually intertwine my stories sometimes and my characters. But again, they keep me taken away. What are their names? I think I wrote one of them down because it's such a quirky, weird one. It's called The 7.5. What is it? Hold on, I wrote this one down because I didn't want to forget it. 7.5. Oh, and I got to pull it up. You can ask me another question in the meantime, but it's so weird and strange.
Next one was, if you could have had a different profession, what would it have been?
It's funny. I wanted to be an eye doctor. When I was in the 7th grade, it's the first time I was able to, like, I didn't realize I needed glasses. You get your eyes checked at school, and I would just memorize all the letters that everyone was saying, because I didn't want to be wrong, again, I'm shy and I didn't want the attention. But when I actually found out I needed glasses, this whole world opened up. I could see the chalkboard. I was playing basketball and soccer. I could see my teammates. It was like the eye doctor was like this amazing person to me. And I just loved it. I love biology. I love dissecting things. I would have loved to have been an eye doctor. I think I would have gone that route.
What do they call them in the States? Because here in the UK, we call them opticians.
Optometrists.
Yeah.
Yeah, eye doctors. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would have had a lot of enjoyment, for a spell. Or else something music oriented where I was either working with the venue or a booking agent or a tour manager. I think I'd have to believe in the band, but I think being a tour manager, I mean, logistics and juggling, that's what I do. I think that would have been something interesting. But I probably at the end of the day would have been dying to play music myself. So it might have been a little hard. So
Who in life, Christine, would you say has been your greatest inspiration?
my dad,
Yeah.
he was a musician. And he was the guy that always would shoot hoops with me for basketball or kick the soccer ball. He and I are very close. We still are. And my sister and my mom gravitated towards each other, and my father and I did everything together. He was supportive. Any crazy idea, I was like, Dad, let's build a treehouse. Okay. Like, Dad, let's go ride bikes to, it's so far away, but he would just be on board with what I was interested in. And musically, he stopped playing guitar about maybe 10, 15 years ago. He still comes out to shows. I mean, my parents, like I said, he's around 75. He loves music. He's such a support. And he's just been a good role model. He's a good person. Everybody loves him. It's like everyone knows, everyone calls him Paparilla. So
Okay.
he's loved not just by his family, but friends, my bandmates, fans all know Paparilla. He's just that guy that he would support them and what they were doing. So he's been a big influence and a great supporter of me, and my mother too. Yeah.
We talk newspapers next. Do you read a newspaper? And if so, which one do you read?
Yeah, interesting. I have not read a newspaper in many years. My dad used to get the Washington Post on Sundays, and I go over there, and it was like so nice to actually read a newspaper. I listen to NPR and the BBC once I get in my car. Otherwise, I don't even, I try to look at the news online, and I don't get a newspaper. I'll look at something local. It's more of a entertainment paper, what's going on. But I don't read a paper anymore. I mean, I remember those days when we used to do it, get the funnies, get the comics, read those, and then the magazine, and then the local stuff. But don't have anything that I still read newspaper wise locally. Yeah.
Do you like to cook in your spare time? And I was going to ask you, what is your favorite food?
Oh, I do like to cook. I went vegan maybe about 2 years ago, and it's hard. So I would say I'm more vegetarian. So I was cooking a lot of new and interesting things, not always well, but I got decent at some of those things. I grew up, my mother's from Italy, so I'm half Italian, half Czechoslovakian. So, hands down, growing up in an Italian family, I still love pizzas and pastas and Italian dishes. And that's what I used to always cook. But I do love Thai food a lot. And I am, still weaving my way through the food, especially going vegetarian, vegan, ebbing and flowing through the options that we have and what you have to make, and trying to stay healthy as I get older, and as I still want to continue to tour and do what I love to do. It's like just things you got to think about as you keep going on. So
This next one seems to stump most of our guests. They always struggle with this one, or they have to have a little bit of time to think. But who would you say is your favorite cultural icon?
I don't, it's so interesting. I don't really have one, but people that come to mind, and this might be strange, some of the British shows I watch Vera, for instance. Vera is the detective, and she has a big old blue Land Rover, and she to me is an icon. I'm actually on the fan page on Facebook. I admit it. Yes, you can tell people. I think sometimes people love the characters that are represented more than some people in real life. I don't know if you find that.
Yeah.
But she pops to mind. I mean, the Obamas are amazing. Anybody that Brandi Carlile is amazing with her foundations, and anybody that gives back to me is someone worth listening to and making time for. But I don't really have like a big go-to person right now that I can be like, yes, that's a big cultural icon I'd like to go have coffee with and learn from. So someone, hopefully. Oh,
Curse words next. We all say them.
am I allowed to say?
Yeah. What's your favorite
Fuck
curse
is the
word and
best
why?
word. Just fuck. I mean, just the hard consonant, and it just, that's it. Yes,
just-
that is my favorite curse word.
Works every time.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you say is your favorite place or holiday
Ah.
destination?
Interesting. So where I live in the States, I'm on the East Coast. New England is the area north of New York, starting in Connecticut. So it's known as the Cape. It's like, it's magical. I've been going up to the Cape in New England, like Massachusetts and in New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island. It's like all on the coast. It's rocky. There's small shanty towns. It's just like this, I don't know, it's this wonderful place I've always enjoyed. I've been going up there since the 90s. And whenever I get up that way, I feel like I can sigh of relief. There's something about New England, the coast area, that I have just fallen in love with. Even New Hampshire, which is more mountains, the White Mountains are up there. I was going up there once or twice a year, winter and summer, because it's very different. Mountains in the snow, and then mountains in the summer, is very different. But something just rewarding and beautiful about those areas that I will continue to go back to up in New England and the Cape.
From New England in the Falls to a question that I really hate to ask a musician, but I will. Who is your favorite music artist? And what would you say is your favorite album of all time?
Of all time is so hard. I kind of have a top 5, and I'll give you a couple of them just because it's so hard to be that ultimate. U2 was one of the biggest influences on my life. Unforgettable Fire was my favorite album by them.
I always thought that was a lot better than the Joshua Tree.
Absolutely. Joshua Tree, things started changing, but something about Unforgettable Fire, because I love Boy and War. I like their early stuff. Wide Awake in America.
I always liked War because it
Mhm.
was they were kind of punky, weren't they? When they
a little more like garage bandy. But Unforgettable, I'm a Daniel Lanois fan. So when you put him and Brian Eno together and they worked on that album, Unforgettable Fire, that is one of my top 5. Peter Gabriel's So is another top album. Like Old Genesis, like those are way up there because they're timeless and they're just so good. So good. Yeah.
And favorite albums? Are there some you still go back to that kind of resonate for you, a certain period in your life, or you like the sound, the production on the album? Any that you can kind of cite?
That U2 and Unforgettable Fire and So I definitely go back to. Sarah McLachlan had an album, Fumbling Towards Ecstasy, in the 90s. Just brilliant. I remember seeing her and being really inspired. Darkness in the music, but hope. I mean, just really, really, really good musicians. Snow Patrol's second album, Eyes Wide Open, that was like Chasing Cars is on that album. That's an album I go back to sometimes because it was just part of my life. I listened to it over and over, and it really just helped me get through stuff I just felt again listening to their music and his vocals. Also Dido, No Angel, the first album. Man, when I heard that album, I think it was in my car for 2 months straight. I'm surprised the CD didn't break, but there was something about her, the cool laid backness of that album that I go back to, and I never get, it's just timeless to me. Yeah. Those are a couple.
Okay. What would you say, Christine, is your greatest achievement to date?
Oh, my greatest achievement to date, I think, is being able to still continue doing this music that I love, but have this work-life balance. I finally figured out how to live and also live with the music, if that makes sense. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and to be able to still share music, write music, hit the road and affect people is like so special to me. But also to come home, and like I said, I'm married, I have dogs, I have a cat, I have a family, my parents are close by. Having that balance is probably the biggest important thing to me. I mean, I've done some cool shows and great things, but at the end of the day, your family and I think what's close to you is the most important. So.
And now the last question, Christine Havrilla, how do you wish to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as a kind, giving person, and it's funny. I had this other nickname that I just got a mug from a friend today. It's ROFS, ROFS. People call me ROFS, which means ray of fucking sunshine. So that's the acronym. That's how I want to be remembered, because even with so much crap around us and so much negativity, there's so much good. And I try to remind people to find that, because it's so important. So ROFS, ROFS, ROFS. That's how I want to be remembered.
I'd like to finally thank you for giving up your time, 60 minutes of your time, well, 60 minutes plus, to be a guest. I say this evening, it's probably about 5:30 where you are now,
Yeah,
isn't it?
It is 5:30. Yeah, 5:30. Yep.
Thanks for being a guest on Your Take. And before we kind of started recording, I said to you that I've done, I think we're up to about 58 interviews.
Amazing.
Of which we've only uploaded 40 so far. But I must be perfectly honest with you, of all the interviews I've done, and I've enjoyed them all actually, but this one for me has just been a joy, because
Thank you.
you come across as very warm. You love what you do. Your passion for music has just shone through the interview from the beginning to the very end. And it's just been a really interesting experience to hear your stories about your time on the road, people you've met, the different places you've been in the US, wanting to come to the UK.
Yeah.
And also, if I had to kind of sum up my typical impression of kind of a musician, you kind of personify it in many ways, because you're very cool, very warm, and a very good musician as well. So thank you kindly.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I mean, again, how do I want to be remembered? How you just said that. That's really kind of you, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and speak, my words to new people and get my music to new people, wherever people watch your amazing show. I mean, I'm so glad you're still doing it, and you're going to hit 60 pretty soon. That's a great thing.
How do we join the sort of fan base and discover and find out more about your music? And you said about coming to the UK. Is that going to go ahead? Is that really likely to happen?
I have been talking to people, musicians, and I have been in touch with some booking agency. When COVID hit, everything kind of just disintegrated. I'm working on it. I really am. And if you do want to find me and my music and what gear I use and videos, so ChristineHavrilla.com is a great place to start, because from there you can go to YouTube and to Facebook and everywhere else. But that's a great place to start. We have photos from shows, we have videos, the tour schedule, bio, gear, everything is right there. So ChristineHavrilla.com is a great place to start, and then go from there.
I wish you all the best with the musical projects, the film that you mentioned, of course.
Yeah, thank you.
And I hope maybe one day I'll see you live on stage in Bristol.
I would love to play. That would be so fantastic, especially after having this great opportunity. So I will be in touch for sure. I'm letting you know if I'm coming to the UK for sure. So
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you.